Excuse me, being 3 o'clock, we'll call the meeting in order. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, going to number 3, public comment. We do have one for public comment. Kelly Borkart.
Oh, sorry, I stole it. I stole it. Here it is.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Kelly Borchard, Executive Director of Child Caring. Thanks for the opportunity to come again and publicly comment about a subject that is of great importance to me as the Executive Director of Child Caring. I acknowledge that you've heard from me a number of times over the last several meetings about the child care crisis that we're facing here in Marathon County, and I'm proud to be a part of the Marathon County Dream Up core team, especially since Aaron is not able to be here this afternoon, if you would have questions. To remind you, Child Caring is a nonprofit agency that's located here in Marathon County, and we help to recruit and retain child care programs and help families find child care. We're recognized as unbiased local child care experts. In our role, we would not support reducing regulation of child care as suggested by Supervisor Baker's resolution. Child care certification standards and licensing regulations protect the health and safety of our youngest, most vulnerable citizens here in Marathon County. Young children need the most care and support. They should be held to the highest standards of care and supervision, and we simply cannot assure health and safety without regulation and monitoring. In fact, I recall a conversation I had a few years ago from a mom at our office who called looking for a licensed child care provider. She had had her child in care at an unregulated family child care program who had 11 children in her care, and her 2.5-year-old son had climbed on the counter in the bathroom, grabbed some cough medicine, and drank it enough to cause a visit to the ER. This incident is one example why it's so important to have capacity, supervision limits, as well as health and safety standards spelled out within regulation in child care. All child care regulations are set by the state of Wisconsin, so a pilot project at the county level, as suggested in the resolution, would face significant barriers. It's nearly impossible to maintain high standards of health and safety, as suggested by Supervisor Baker, without providing guidance through the development of regulations. Regular review, especially gathering feedback from families and the child care community, is super important. However, we need immediate solutions, as the issues we're facing around affordability and accessibility won't be solved even in the long term by reducing regulation. The Marathon County Dream Up team is focused on immediate local solutions like public investment. You've heard from the Marathon County Dream Up team that the local child care providers need additional support to continue to offer high quality, accessible child care to families in our community so that parents can remain in the workforce. Other Wisconsin counties have made the choice to invest in child care and support the child care industry and workforce in a variety of ways. In August, I provided you an update on which counties were utilizing their ARPA dollars to support child care, and there's a new county to add since then. Last month, Outagamie County allocated $750,000 of their ARPA dollars to support a shared services network for child care programs to include free foundational trainings for the child care providers, access to IT consultants, a cleaning service to deep clean child care spaces on a monthly basis, and that's just a partial list. To date, we're aware of at least 8 cities and counties in Wisconsin that have allocated ARPA dollars in an effort to improve the child care crisis. Again, we should be supporting and investing in child care in our community, not trying to reduce the regulations. I intend to stay here and be available during your important discussion this afternoon about the county's role in supporting affordable, high-quality child care. I invite you to please use Child Caring and myself as a resource today and in future conversations and planning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Can we ask her any questions? No. Just public comment. Correct. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. We are going to, if it's all right with the committee, we are going to go down to number 6. If anybody has any objections. Okay, thank you. We're going to go to number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 6A, 2024 Marathon County Public Library budget. Lance will kick it off.
Sure, I'll kick it off with, it's kind of more in alignment with item C, but Supervisor or Chair Robinson from HR Finance and Property, Christy and I are here. This is kind of the second iteration of the traveling road show that we had earlier in the year relative to budget. And this is now, I believe, is this the fourth committee? Third or fourth committee that we've gone to since staff delivered the budget, excuse me, to the county board in HR Finance and Property. I want to start with kind of some big takeaways on our end before we lead into exactly what you alluded to, Chair Seifelt, and that is each of the department budget presentations. From a county administrator perspective, as I said at the full board meeting, this is really a status quo budget. There's not, and I used this example this morning at infrastructure, there's not, oh, this is a new program X, $500,000 over here in the budget. All of the departments, from my perspective, are delivering the same services that they delivered last year largely, and our budget is consistent with that. So that's on the high end from my perspective, and I think that's helpful to keep in mind from the policy board perspective that you all as elected leaders sit in. We didn't get direction to add a new program or a new service, really, so that's not what the budget is about. That said, on the accounting side, in the documents you're going to see that Christy has put together working with the department heads, there's a lot of accounting differences within the budget. Things are accounted differently. You'll probably hear us use the word mapped, or things are mapped differently, or our mapping is ongoing. And that's because we made a lot of changes to the way that our legacy system, the way that we referred to things in terms of general ledger lines. Christy can correct me, but what's the number of codes we had? 36.
36,000. We ran out of numbers. We started using the alphabet.
So we had a lot of stuff, and we went from that to try to very closely mirror the state chart of accounts as recommended through the Department of Revenue. So things look and feel different. And our budget, individual department budgets, certainly how things are accounted for look and feel different. But there again are not those program changes. And I'll just tell you in administration, I'm going to talk about this at the executive committee because that's where I report. Our budget looks different because one of the things that came into county administration was an account for capital improvements, special projects. It was in capital improvements, it's special projects. There's a reason it should be in administration, because to get approval for a special project, everyone needed to talk to me anyway. But it makes it look like, oh my gosh, administration's budget's fundamentally different. No, it's stuff that was in one area is in another, and that happens throughout all of our department budgets. We talked about fuel this morning at infrastructure. It used to be 2 separate line items for diesel and regular fuel, and now they're together. So there's a lot of that. So on the accounting side, it looks different, but from the program side, it's largely the same. That said, I'm sure each of these departments that are here today to talk to you about their budget, they're going to be able to point to things that, from their perspective, are significant changes. I just wanted to talk about the programmatic side. So, Christy, is there anything else you want to talk about, or Chair Robinson, any other context you want to set? All right. So that was longer than 30 seconds, but hopefully about 3 minutes. With that, I think library was, Mr. Chair, where you want to start?
We'll start with Leah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Seifelt, and everyone else for giving me the opportunity to talk about the library's budget. What you'll see on these next 2 slides is the actual 2024 library budget request that was in the library board's packet, presented to them and approved in September's meeting. Here's a small version. If you need glasses like I do, a more detailed version is in that packet. But I'm just going to go over a couple of items so you can get an idea of it. It's a straightforward, simple budget, but below that red box there at the top is the 2023 requested budget compared to the 2024 budget. So in Lance's budget message to all departments, he gave a few areas that we need to focus on. The first thing was to not add any new positions. Oh, can you zoom in?
Yep.
Gorgeous. Thank you. That's good. So Lance, who also can zoom in on this detailed document, asked us to not add any new positions. He asked us to keep to the 3% personnel increase, that's sort of county-wide plan, and to work to not increase our operations budget more than 1% if possible. So what we did is we worked really, really hard to meet those expectations. We were successful. As you can see in the red box here, next year's overall budget needs are near identical to this year's request, with a less than 1% increase overall. That's including personnel. I actually think that number over here on the right is a little bit smaller now. Since this was presented, there was a dental insurance revision.
That's actually the worksheet that you guys used, and the final budgets are down further in the page.
Okay.
I know this is what Lee's presenting. This is the tool that we are used to seeing. So that's how we used to upload part of the operating script. So she's working off one of our internal tools. So the final numbers are down in that same template format we have later. But
Great.
it is a nice tool to try to match what we had in the past to what we have now.
Thank you. Also, there was a discussion with county administration about an additional cut, which the library board approved, and I'll discuss shortly. The next section is the revenue section, which may seem strange because the benefit of libraries, of course, is that our resources and services are free to the public. Just so you know, we only charge for passports. We do that because that's a legal requirement, and to match what the clerk's office does as well. We charge for printing and faxing, but only enough to cover the costs of paper and ink, essentially. Another unique revenue item that Marathon County Public Library has is rent from WVLS. So our system, which represents 25 member libraries in the area, their offices are housed at Wausau, Maine, Marathon County Public Library. So they pay us rent for that. And then the last thing that we have revenue line for is late fines. And now, of course, we don't want revenue of late fines. We just want people to return their items on time so that other people can check them out. And I will mention now that there's a trend in libraries lately to get rid of late fines entirely. I am not on the bleeding edge of trends. I like to see how things go. So I'm happy to take opinions and ideas from anyone on county board or the public related to this. But before we implement something like removing late fines, I want to just sit and see if it works elsewhere. Again, we're not trying to make money. They're small fees. They're like 10 cents a day or $1 a day for audiovisual, but it's a small incentive for people to bring back their materials so that other people can use them. And if you did take away fines, and then we realized it didn't work, and no one returned their things, it would be really hard to reverse that and put the fines back in place. So that's why I am just slow to move on this sort of new trend. I like the idea of it. We want to be accessible, of course. We want everybody to be able to use the library. We don't want to prohibit people, but I'm not quite sure that this is the way to go. So anyhow, sorry for that side caveat there. The final two sections are the operating expenses and personnel expenses, with personnel being the overwhelming majority of the budget, like most other departments. Okay, on the next slide, oh, now it's too zoomed in. I see it, though. Okay, here's just a little bit of historical context. You can see that 2024's budget request is only a 1.1% increase over 2021's, despite overall increasing costs. Because the library board also agreed to cut an additional $61,000 at the county administrator's request, our total request is actually $31,000 and some change less than last year. Another thing to note that now that we've had, one full budget year under our belts, we're better able to assess like what line items could be leaned out based on actual expenditures. Here's a list of a couple of notable increases that we've experienced for 2024. Obviously, the 3% increase in salaries. There's an additional cost. No, it's not me. There's an additional cost for an electronic subscription that we pay every 3 years. So it wasn't on the previous two budget cycles. If you're curious, that is the A to Z database. It's a job search reference mailing list database that includes like millions of businesses and executives and residents. And a lot of our patrons use it if they're early stage entrepreneurs, for things like marketing, for business efforts. This database is fairly expensive. Every 3 years we pay roughly $12,000. Now there is a gold standard called Reference USA, but it is much more expensive. So right now we're sticking with this one, but that's one of the things that bumped up our budget in 2024. The next one was sort of an unexpected increase. I mean, we expected an increase, but it was more than expected, was our WVLS membership fees. This went up almost $19,000 from the previous year. In a way, that's a good thing because it means that we are a broader share of our system's use. So I think we're at 40% and then 32% with an average of like 36% of every library in the system. So for example, there are 25 libraries in our system. We represent 36% of that. So that means our membership fee is $118,000, where there are some small libraries that are equivalent to one of our branches, for example, and their fees are like $7,000. So it's really dramatic. It's one of the biggest expenses that we have, somewhat offset by the rent that they pay to us, so that helps. But it's just a big expense, and there's nothing you can do about it. I can't negotiate. It's based on shares. So whatever the cost of being a member of the system is, we get X percentage based on usage, based on our collection, based on how many, what our population is that we're serving. And then also insurance expenses. This is not health insurance. This is liability. Mary Jo, before she retired, estimated between 5 and 9%, and I think we used 7% to budget for that. Oh, good. Now, notable savings. On this page, I've included here the biggest savings that we were able to sort of accomplish with this budget, and it really offset a lot of those just things that increase all of the time. So the number one area, let me just get here. Yeah, so you can see up there we combined two positions. So this is something that was a lucky happenstance. We promoted our circulation team lead to a branch coordinator position. That left that position open, and we had a page team lead who was just an exceptional employee, and she believed and we believed that she could supervise both of those teams. And so we did sort of a beta test in the 2023 to see if we thought that that was feasible, and something that wouldn't be a nightmare for her, and able to do a really good job overseeing both of those teams, and it's working well. So we, in 2024, have permanently combined those positions. So instead of paying 2 team leads, we're only paying 1 to oversee both of those teams. The other 2 are not funded positions. So that means we have a seasonal position that we've used fairly frequently, although not since maybe 2020, I think, or 2019. But it was a seasonal position when we have big projects or when we have a huge, like, backlog of materials that come in from our vendor, have somebody come in on a temporary basis. So we still have that position as a holding position in the event that we need it, but we did not fund it because we don't estimate needing it in 2024. Also, we have a part-time branch. We didn't fill that position like at the beginning of when COVID started, and we seem to still be doing okay. So we're leaving that position open in the event that it's untenable, but right now we don't believe that we're going to need to fund it. So we were able to save a lot of money in personnel that way. So I just want to talk about what that does on the bigger picture as well. So when we didn't fund those 2 positions and we combined the position, it leaves our personnel budget very, very lean. So it doesn't have any sort of a cushion for potential retirement payouts or employee health insurance changes. I think the previous administration did that. So we have a couple of employees right now who are eligible for retirement. And if they choose to retire, we pay out their PTO, any sick leave that they have, and it's a big chunk for us. So it's something that we're assuming, if it occurs, based on a history of average vacancies, we'll still be able to manage. The other big expense that we didn't account for and that these positions aren't cushioning for any longer is employee health insurance changes. We also have a couple of employees that are in their mid-20s, and right around 26, a lot of employees get sort of bumped off of their family's insurance and need to take on insurance. So we haven't budgeted for that, we haven't accounted for that, but we believe, based on vacancies in the past, that should it occur, we will be okay. Obviously, this effort also attempts to prevent a large rollover to our reserves at next year's end, the bulk of which has been due to personnel vacancies in the past. You'll recall the previous year we had a large rollover because 3 of our highest paid positions were vacant for quite some time. I know that because I was doing those jobs for like 6 months. But anyhow, it caused a large rollover. So our philosophy here, because having a reserve is statutory. Anything left over at the end of the year is by statute, but it's always been a point of contention with county board. We don't want it to look like, and I don't know what was done in the past. I don't know purpose or intention or motive, but we want to make sure that we are spending our taxpayer dollars responsibly, that we're not building some big, room of gold. We have no reason for that. So, I've talked about this with Lance at length. The idea is that because it's a statute, whatever is left over is going to roll over into our reserve funds, and then we need to have responsible, be good stewards of our resources, purposes for those funds, right? So I'll get into that soon with the creation of a project list and just sort of a technology inventory and a plan for that. Okay, I said a lot more on this slide than I meant to, so we'll just go to the next slide. Now here's some notable operation savings. Staff taking on some of the processing that was outsourced in the past. So our primary book vendor, Baker and Taylor, they increased a lot of their processing fees and they added some bizarre fees like shipping fees and things like that. So, we talked internally, we tried to create some efficiency so we could find a little bit of space in our support staff area so that they could take on some of those processes that we were previously historically paying our vendor for. So simple things like RFID tags, they charged quite a bit for that. Now we do that in-house. Putting head stamps on the books, something that's very simple, can be done while the person who's waiting for someone to come to our drive-through can be doing. It's not something that you need detailed focus on. You can just do the head stamps, and then we don't have to pay our vendor because we're doing it in-house. So that's another way that we did some savings. The maintenance on our automated materials handler is lower with the new machine, basically because the machine is newer. The fees are lower. As the machine gets older, the fees go up, but right now it's a great savings because we have a brand new, shiny, automated materials handler. We also have lowered our technology supply budget with the tech plan implementation that I alluded to earlier. I'll go into detail about that shortly, but there are previously not been any sort of comprehensive tech equipment inventory with which to plan for inevitable replacements. There's also a lowered supply budget to meet current needs. That's just basically like we're using less paper. So we were able to just tighten up that budget line a little bit. And just so you know, this is something that's always ongoing. Stephanie, our business specialist, is always looking for ways to save. As well, our support services manager, they're currently looking at ways to possibly, if it's a good, reliable system, we're looking to switch, say, our phones at our branches to internet phones because it would save us a lot of money. So we're always looking for little ways to pinch and to save. And so these are a few ways that we did for the 2024 budget. Okay, here, this document is what you have in your packets that came from finance. We decorated it a little bit with some highlights, and I just want to explain what some of those are. So in the revenue area, the orange highlight there, that's an anomaly to the tune of $39,000 or something like that, that we were told is a health insurance conversion cleanup. So they're working on that. I just want to point that out, that that's not standard. It's something with the transition from Kayenta to Workday, or Kayenta to, yeah. What else do we have? Oh, the blue highlight as well. That's just a reminder that includes, that's not revenue. That's the $350,000 that county administration requested that the library board cut, that was then transferred from our reserves back into our budget. And then the extra 6,600-ish is just encumbered funds for purchased materials that haven't come in yet. Sometimes we buy materials before publication date, and the vendor isn't allowed to ship them out until it gets close to that. That way we can have them ready to roll on, those bestsellers. When they come out, people are ready to get them. So sometimes we purchase them in advance, but the invoice doesn't come, but they were purchased in the previous year and then paid for in the following year. And some are just back ordered as well. So that's what the blue is. The pink, of course, is the $69,000 additional cut from county board, just so you can see the difference there. But otherwise, it's identical to the document that is in the packet. Expenditures to date. So we have, these are just things that, so this is the budget versus actual. This is where we are at. And then what we have left to spend still, what is expected, we have the standard things like the pay periods. That's, again, another $800,000 that'll be picking up in the next 3 months. We have non-personnel insurance, again, that liability insurance that hasn't been billed to us yet from the county. That's around $45,000 we expect. And then there are some payments to municipalities for branch locations to the tune of probably $30,000. Some branch locations, some municipalities charge us monthly, some charge us quarterly, and some charge us annually. So we get some of those at the end of the year. And then, of course, some of our periodical subscriptions are paid annually and coming due at the end of the year. Now going on to our CIP. We call it our reserve fund or our positive fund balance, but it's documented in county finance as a CIP because it's a rollover account. So as I mentioned earlier, this year we created a comprehensive library CIP project list to help plan for future expenses, and we'll continue to use up our reserves to accomplish these projects in-house without any additional county aid. These bigger ticket items are never budgeted for in our operating budget to keep our operating budget as lean as possible and making responsible use of our reserve funds. That's what I went into earlier. I think, I've talked about this with Lance and I've talked about this with Chris Holman. Generally speaking, structural items on the building are the county's typical. That would be, you would see that on a county CIP project. Anything that's internal, that's library specific, anything that's design related would be the responsibility of the library. Now there are exceptions to that in both directions, but that's generally how I've been trying to think of it. And so again, this list has helped us just make excellent use of any reserve funds that we do have now. It's possible that we don't. We all hope and pray that we don't have any vacancies because we run such a lean staff that having somebody out for a medical reason really throws us all for a loop, and we have to find coverage and we have to scramble for that. So ideally, we wouldn't have any vacancies, and then we wouldn't have any reserve funds. And so what does that mean? If we have a plan for those reserve funds, it means that we have to just wait. Or ask the county, or fundraise. So if we needed new, right now we're purchasing new patron computers. Our patron computers are well used. We have them at 9 locations. I think we have 68 patron computers. That adds up, and they are just well used, and so they need to be replaced. And so, if we have the money in our reserves, we're able to do that. If not, we'll have to wait before we can replace those. It's not an ideal system, but I think, again, it's being as fiscally responsible as possible with those reserve funds. Let's just see. So here are some things that we've spent so far with our reserve funds after we've created this list. The sorter, which is the automated materials handler, we made the final payment on that. The total cost for that was $110,000, which sounds outrageous. But when they put it in place 12 years ago, it saved several positions. So we were able to not hire as many pages because the sorter takes up a lot of that work. So we got a new one because that one was well beyond its life. And we just paid the second half of that in 2023. The self-checkout stations were purchased at the same time. They're also faulty and failing. We put a down payment on that. I think I have some numbers here too, if you're curious. We put a down payment of $23,000, but the total is going to be around $46,000 for all self-checkout machines. We've done a server install, around $7,500. We replaced some staff workstations that were broken or not meeting the needs of our staff for about $5,000 there. Server backup subscription and support was around $6,500. And then Hatley, we recently switched to fiber. And that was a one-time cost of $3,000 just to get the equipment to make it fiber ready. Otherwise, we'll actually be saving money at the Hatley branch because of the fiber. These are monies planned to be spent out of our reserve funds that we haven't gotten the invoices for yet, or they're still in progress. The rest of that self-checkout station. The Athens move, of course, is going to be a big expense for us. We purchased a handrail for the Mosinee branch. The ramp there in the wintertime was super slick and icy, and we received several complaints from our elderly patrons who were having a hard time accessing the branch. So we thought that that was a worthy investment in the Mosinee location. Some branch furniture, again, we did a big redesign project a few years ago now. And I think the original plan was to do all locations to have a bit of a refurbishment, but perhaps because of costs or other reasons that I'm not sure of, the branch upgrades sort of faded out of the plan, and we just did the refurbishment at Wausau. But rest assured, the branches need furniture refreshment. They have some like chairs and tables that are broken, in bad condition, stained, and so we're hoping to do those replacements. The rest of it, we already have a list, we already have a plan. We're just getting quotes at this time. What else? Some cabinets that weren't finished when we did the original redesign at the main desk. And as I mentioned earlier, the patron computer replacements, that's going to run about $52,000. And that's with an exceptional discount from our system. And also, we're not replacing the monitors because those are still in good shape. That concludes my presentation. Here, though, you'll see on the left, stuffed animal campout story time at Stratford. This is MJ. She is our branch coordinator out at Stratford, and she learned to play the ukulele so she could do programming with the ukulele. And on the right, we've got the Miller and Mike Magic Show. I think that was a previous SLP program that we did. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Leah. Any questions from the committee or staff? Supervisor Baker.
Yes, is that presentation supposed to be in the packet? Because I didn't see that in the packet.
Yep.
Which packet?
What's on the screen is currently from the website for this committee's packet.
I just ran an update.
Okay. I do have a question, Leah. You talked about taking away the fines from late books, and are some libraries doing that now?
Yes, I mean, I think there's some even in Wisconsin that are doing it. I haven't heard terrible things about it. It's my own apprehension. I think it's working. I just would like to see maybe in a couple of years if it's still working.
Because I really don't think that would be a good idea. You're going to get people stalling more and more. So do we have the update of Supervisor Baker's on here, or is it, or everybody got it sent to them on the packet part? Well, it wasn't in the packet. Supervisor Baker sent it out earlier.
That's two down. That's not for this agenda.
Okay.
I do have those. I can pull those up when we get to them. I got the 5 different files, so we can pull them up.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
Neither Kim nor I have that presentation in our packet. Then I just ran the update now, so that's not being put. That is not being put on the. When we run our update, that's not coming through. And I'm talking about using our iPads. And you updated it using. Well, I don't want to belabor the point right now, but it's not on my iPad, and I just ran an update. I believe you.
Okay, now, for the library budget, Lance, do we need to have a motion to accept this? Or no? Or is,
No, it's agendized, and I'll defer to Chair Robinson to talk about what HR Finance is looking for, but I already have delivered my administrator's budget to the HR Finance and the county board. Certainly, you can discuss aspects of the county's determination as to what to levy for library support, but there's no action necessary. That was certainly not from administration's perspective.
okay, Supervisor Robinson?
So we had the same question earlier today at infrastructure. What we're looking for is if you have suggestions that deviate from what is in what was the administrator's, now the finance committee's budget, we would look for that. But we don't need a motion concurring with it. And let me just interject too, that you're having the information presented to you today for the first time. And while we've got a number of dates, we need to publish the budget, but we can still amend it. So we would encourage you to look at the budget, and you'll have one more opportunity before it comes up to the final county board for a final approval. So at your next meeting, you could also look at it if there were some items that you wanted to look at them, and you can make recommendations relative to changes in the budget at that time. We're trying to be as inclusive as we can be, and we're working through the process. We've got a relatively short time frame, but you can do it. If there are changes you would like to make, you can make those recommendations today or at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Then Supervisor Book.
I would just like to thank Leah for the presentation. I think it was very well done, and I'm impressed with the stewardship and the desire to cut as much fat. Any fat, doesn't seem to be much, but what there is, I appreciate the way you've paired this so effectively.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you, Leo. It was a very thorough presentation. So, moving on to 6B, 2024 UW extension contract.
All right. Thank you, Chair Seifelt. I guess that'll work. So this is maybe a little bit of out of order, but we'll try to make it make sense. So included in your packet, I can't even see where are we at? I think it's before this one. Yeah, it's right here, right? Is that 58? It starts at 41, actually. Right. So yeah. So there are two documents in the packet. One is a guidance document that's just kind of background on the relationship between UW Extension and the counties. And this guidance document just goes through that relationship. This was developed in partnership with the Counties Association a couple of years ago, but basically lays out that the extension educators, my position, are state employees contracted with the county basically, and lays out those relationships. So I won't belabor that too much, but then also included in here for reference, which again is a little bit kind of ahead of the cart ahead of the horse, is the budget or the contract, I mean, which starts on page 54. Let me get down to that. And actually starts right there. So this contract just again is essentially for your reference and lays out a little bit more detail around the educator positions. As you go through the budget process and once you get to approving the budget, Lance then has the authority to actually sign the contract. So again, it's just for your review. But I did want to highlight in that contract, it does provide detail of the positions and wanted to explain that a little bit, which will come back up in the budget. There are kind of two sets of positions in a sense. You'll see reference to the co-funded positions, and then the proposed or fully county-funded positions. And so within Marathon County, we have two co-funded positions. That means the county pays a portion of that position. That's the 4-H educator and the ag educator. And then the other positions, which are down below here just a little bit. Get that up. Are the positions that the county provides full funding on. So that's the horticulture educator and the administrative assistant. The third position that's in there is the 4-H Extension Associate Educator. That's included in that line because all the funding comes through the county, but that's actually funding that comes from the Leaders Association, Marathon County 4-H Leaders Association, through the county, and then for the position. So just a note about kind of all the different positions that are included in the budget. And again, we'll talk about the overall numbers, but that's where the professional services budget line relates to the contract.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Any questions for Jeremy?
Oh, the budget, yeah. Yeah, any questions? But do you want me to jump into the budget then?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay. All right, so now, where's that one? 74, I believe. I think I'm going to be sore from stretching this way. All right. Zoom in just a little bit. So the extension budget is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So I won't spend a lot of time in here. And I was able to present to the committee a couple of months ago about some of these details, so you have a sense of the function here. Big picture, the overall budget for extension shows just under a 1% increase. And basically what we did through here is we had personnel increases wrapped into professional services due to wage increases. These are all state employees again. And then we worked to reduce kind of operating expenses to balance out those increases. So that's kind of the big picture. Most of what you see is differences between the 2024 and 2023 budgets are, as Lance mentioned, some of those items being accounted for in different ways. Revenues stayed, essentially the same, showed a little bit of a decline to be a little bit more realistic about the funds coming in. The biggest chunk of revenue is, again, the funds coming from the Marathon County 4-H Leaders Association for that associate position. And then into expenses, the largest line item is the professional services, which again is for the educators and the office assistant position. And then we work to decrease other operating costs. So you see the net difference in overall budget is about $2,000, less than 1% of the overall budget increase from last year, where personnel costs, those professional services, were about a 3% increase overall. So again, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Happy to take any questions about any of the details if you want to dive into those.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you.
Great presentation. Okay, we're going to move back up. I forgot to do number 4 here is to approve the minutes of the August 3rd EED meeting. Motion by Rosenberg, second by Unger, Supervisor Unger. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to number 5. What, 6C? Oh, okay. Discussion of HR, Finance, and Property Committees, 2024 proposed budget and proposed recommendations regarding modifications. John, do you have anything for this, or we went through that already?
Well, you had a presentation on the budgets, and now the question is do members have any concerns relative to the budgeted amounts or any of the policies that are contained in the budget? So I think what you need to do is open it up for members to see if they have any concerns and or amendments that they would want to bring forward.
So is there any questions from the committee on 6C? Supervisor Baker.
Thank you, Chair Seafield. I have 3 different recommendations I'm going to be making. And there is some discussion and questions. So maybe Philia could come back up to the microphone. So thank you for your presentation. I didn't get to give me opportunity before. So I didn't have the benefit of, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I didn't have the benefit of being able to see your presentation on my packet, but I went through the library financials, and I have some questions. So in 2022, the total expenditures were $3,127,673 on one, and the other one was $3,206,148. That I got that from the January.
Oh, I see.
So our tax levy was, and that for that year was $3,217,685. So to me, that looks like we covered the expenditures plus maybe 11,000.
The approved budget included the $350,000 cut
Use the
from
mic,
Lance and also the $69,000.
Correct, I realize that. But I'm saying the actual expenditures, if I look at it correctly, were $3,206,000. The budget was like $3.6 million, but the actual expenditures were 3.2. 3.206,148. 3,206,148. Is that correct? No, I'm on the January packet from the library. I got that from the library packet 2023-01-23.
What's your question?
My question is, am I interpreting that correctly? That the tax levy covered the expenditures plus $11,000?
Plus $11,000? I don't know for sure. I don't think we have that with us.
Sorry, the way it looked to me like you were referring to the numbers is you were looking, oh, sorry. Yeah. It sounded to me like you were referring to the budgeted amount for 2023 and comparing it to what was spent in 2022.
No, I'm sorry. These were both, I may have misspoke. These were 2022 expenditures and 2022 tax levy. And it was in the library packet from January 23.
I don't have the packet with me, so I'm not certain
Okay.
what you're looking
Okay,
at.
well, I believe that those are correct. And, you know, that's unfortunate if we can't verify that, but Then Christie gave me, finance director, gave me the reserves at the end of 2022, which was 350,000 general reserve and 639,835, I'm not sure you call that CIP reserve. So, and I would say those are correct as well?
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
have that in front of me, but I do know that when we had our budget discussion, there was like $518,000 in it this year with expected bills to come in, with the assumption that there would be about 360,000, and that was where the 60,000 cut. So my assumption would be for the previous year, Lance's target number is $300,000. So if we had in excess of that, by that amount, that's what he
Sure.
moved to
so
cut.
that is roughly analogous to what I have.
Yeah, I don't see your numbers in front of me, but I'm assuming we're talking about the same thing.
So then in 2023, through August, from your September budget, I show that you had 2,214,333, and if I prorate that out by 12 divided by 8, so I'm just saying you've used 8, 12, you're going to spend at the same rate, basically.
No, there are big expenses at the end of the year, but if you had to make some assumptions so you can try to assess what's left over, you could do it that way. In my presentation, like I expressed, like we're currently 67% in saturation into our budget, and we have 3 months left. So theoretically, we would be at 75 if we were absolutely perfect, if there were no vacancies, and we're at 67%. But there's also big ticket bills that we get at the end of the year, like I was talking about earlier in the
Right.
presentation. So it isn't divided by 12.
I assume it wouldn't be perfectly that, but if I do that, because it's best information I had, that would come out to 3,321,500. So I guess what I am considering proposing, and I'm open for discussion, but the tax levy increase, in the budget message, it says that it was reduced by 69,000 or 61,000, something in that range.
Yeah, that's what
But
the
if
library
you look
board
at the actual tax levy projections, the tax levy increase went from 3,217,685 for 23 to 3,603,220 in 24. That's a 12% increase.
Well, it's because of the $350,000 that Lance cut from our budget the previous year. That's why
realize
there's
that.
a discrepancy. But our actual request is,
I know.
There's a negligible
Okay,
difference.
I understand that he cut it from your request. Well, what I'm saying is you haven't been spending that amount of money.
we had to replace that money. We had to transfer the money from our reserves into our budget to be able to function with the budget. Now, there will be reserves left. We've had vacancies, so we're not perfect, but we have to reasonably budget for personnel with the assumption that they're going to be there.
So last in 2022, you were substantially under your budget. In 2023, it looks like to me like you're going to be substantially under your budget, and I might be wrong.
Yeah, we're on target this year. Last year, of course, was an exceptional year when it was our first year with the new administration. We had this excess funds, and we were just coming out of COVID. We're back up to fully functioning. We're as busy as ever. We're using all resources, and with the exception of vacancies, we're on target to spend our money. Now, I can't guarantee that there won't be money left. There always is.
And
in every
I'm not
budget.
complaining about that, actually.
We're
Yeah.
doing our best to thin it out and be as tight as humanly possible. But previous to me, when I was interim, there was, just we just talked to Lance, and Lance gave us, the lay of the land to the best of his ability with our short time that we were in the position. And then this year we were able to really tighten it up. So there's nothing I can do about 2021 to 2022. That wasn't me. But this year we have a good handle on it. Our business specialist has really like fine-tooth combed our budget. And so, you know, I don't want to make promises that we won't have money left over at the end of the year. I imagine we will. We are just for the first time fully staffed. Are we fully staffed just as of Monday? Almost.
So what would you project then? What do you have a projection of what?
Well, I
you'll
don't
end
have
up
an
at?
exact projection, but I
Just
do
a
have a
approximate,
percentage.
okay.
Yeah, so we estimated, I thought you might ask, or someone from the committee might ask, that we are roughly 67% into our expenditures. Now, we're 75% into the year, so we're behind a bit. There's money left, but we have big expenses that come towards the end of the year, and I did reference those in the, sorry, I didn't know we were still here. Let me look. Oh, the large expenses still coming, right? So there's about 804,000 in personnel. That's including all benefits, and that's still coming. And the 8 pay periods that haven't been accounted for in that 67%, there's a roughly $45,000 liability insurance bill that we usually get from the county that comes in towards the end of the year. I've got a little bit more detail here if I can get into. Hold, please.
I think if taking a look at the January, that's still on our old legacy system, and we have that's in January. We don't have the ability to make like an accrual, or we have to, or prepaid. So December of 2022 is still open for departments to pay December bills or 2022 bills through the end of January. So that probably isn't going to have some of those remaining outstanding either purchase orders or other items that you may have had outstanding yet for that department. And their largest variance for 2022 was in staffing. It was the only one that was probably over $100,000 under budget. The other ones were within less than $100,000 in the other categories. And the total for the email that I sent you, the total amount that was expenditures under budgets that could roll over for 2022 into 2023. Let me pull it back up again. Was the 300 and, sorry, I'll grab the other sheet. Was the $359,387. So that's what constitutes a portion of that came into the 2023 after 2022 was closed for library.
Okay, so what I was planning to propose initially when I started reviewing this was I was going to suggest that I was going to propose that we increase the tax levy by net new construction, which is 2.3%, as opposed to 12%. And then after I looked at everything, I decided that that wasn't enough, and I was going to make it 3.2%. So I am going to not make that recommendation. I'm not going to recommend that we change anything. I think it's because I just don't feel like I have enough information to make that. I think that's actually unfortunate because I think if I made a recommendation and the committee approved it of like a 4 or 5% increase, that would probably get accepted by the board. I don't think a 12% increase is going to get accepted by the board, so I'm not going to make the recommendation today because I don't feel like I can make it comfortably. But I'm not sure that it won't come up again. So, but I'm not going to ask the committee to vote because I just don't feel like I can. I don't have enough information. I don't have a high enough comfort level in where you're going to end up this year that I feel like I can make a recommendation. So I would say this discussion will probably come up again, unfortunately. But I was hoping to come up with something that we could all agree on and amicably. But So anyway, I'm going to just withdraw or not make a recommendation for that. I have 3 items total. The second one has to do with the library chillers. So it doesn't impact, I mean, it impacts you, but it doesn't impact, it's the county, not the.
I'm not terribly familiar with HVAC. Sorry.
So, well, I appreciate that you came in and made the presentation. I might have some more questions for you, so, okay. So I've had a number of people contact me, supervisors and non-supervisors, and ask why it is that branch libraries don't have to pay for their own buildings and are responsible for the HVAC in their own buildings. The county, won't kick into for a stained glass window for the Mosinee Library was one of the, and for the Wausau Library, or the headquarters library, that is completely paid for by the county. So that it is deemed by some, including me, not to be equitable that the county pays for all of the major equipment for the branch, for the county library, or for the headquarters library, the Wausau Library, if you will, but not any for the branch libraries. And so I asked Lance to provide documents for, how that policy came about. And it turns out that in 1992, 93, I was here, then I moved back to Marathon County in 93, so I was here during this time period. I remember this. But the library was completely reconstructed or remodeled, depending on how you. And at that time, there was an agreement between the city and the county, and the city actually gave the library to the county, which, the county made the decision to accept it. I'm not sure why. But that agreement says that for that construction, that was split 50-50 with the city. And it leaves it pretty nebulous as far as down the road. But I'm basically saying it seems to me that our HVAC should be paid by 50% by the city. And I'm sure there's going to be some pushback on that, and I see a waving pushback already. So that's a point of discussion. I would like to say, and I can understand that the city is not going to want to do that right off, that they probably don't in this year's budget, that's not going to happen, I'm sure. And I don't know, but so I would like to give Supervisor Robinson a chance to respond, because I can see that he would like to.
Supervisor Robinson?
I'm going to wear a different hat because the negotiations for that agreement were taking place mostly when I was mayor. So I can bring that perspective. While we didn't reach an agreement in 1992, we thought we had one, and it fell apart between a walk between City Hall and the courthouse with former Administrator McBain. But it was a very contentious case, and the city was looking at it, and you can get into all sorts of equity arguments. You can look at highways. There's very, very little of the highway fund that goes into the city of Wausau, proportionate to the amount of county roads and levy, and this was one of those. But the agreement was we needed to do something with the building. The city felt as if it was a county facility and had been used for the county for some period of time, and they ultimately agreed to pay for 50% of the cost to bring it up to speed. It's sort of like a jurisdictional transfer, which we do with roads. And upon investing that money, the library then became the responsibility of the county. But those negotiations were at times contentious, at times, but they ultimately led to an agreement between two entities that transferred ownership and long-term responsibility. The issue of the long-term maintenance costs were very clearly part of that discussion. So that it was not done without that thought going forward. It was done very deliberately at that time. And again, it took quite some time to finalize that agreement on the transfer and get the agreement on the investment in the library.
In your opinion, was that spelled out in the agreement? Because I don't see it in there.
Well, I think with the transfer of the facility as a headquarters, the assumption on all parties was that that became the responsibility of the county going forward for the maintenance of that building. And you could bring former Administrator McBain back in, but I think that is, and Mayor Hess, who was the mayor when it was implemented, is passed away. But I think that the fundamental principles were there from probably 1990 through 93 when the discussions were taking place.
And you're aware that the tax deed says that we can give it back to the city if we want? So would you agree that, would you have any interest of equity? Do you think that it would be feasible to talk to the city, or there would be no cooperation from the city at all, in your best opinion?
I thought it was a fait accompli. It's no different than currently we're upgrading Highway B in Marathon County Road. At the end of the upgrade, we are transferring jurisdictional transfer to the village of Marathon City. In Marathon City, from that point forward, we'll be responsible for the maintenance and repair of that road. It's it's very like that with a jurisdictional transfer. The county's responsibility goes away, similar to what they've done with Rib Mountain Drive with the town, soon to be our village of Rib Mountain. You transfer the assets, and then one of the entities no longer has responsibility. So you can certainly raise it with the city, but I would be surprised if you got much traction. I'm just trying to bring the historic perspective.
Okay. But this issue also, I'm not going to make a motion, but I will also say it's probably not resolved. The third one is to do with, I might get less pushback on this one. So the third one has to do with the UW Stevens Point Wausau. We have $275,000 in the CIP fund balance. I don't believe Ozella is here today. But there's concern whether we should invest that money without a longer term commitment. I believe Supervisor Robinson shares that. So I'll ask Supervisor Robinson if he has a recommendation on how we should proceed on that.
I still affectionately refer to it as UWMC. As a proud alumni and former student government president, it will always be UWMC. However, the county owns the building. So the dilemma is we've got buildings there where the county has a responsibility for the buildings, and we make investments into them that sometimes realize cost savings to the university system. We have been struggling with what is the role of the dorm going forward? What are the uses of some of the other buildings? I think that there is a need separate from this to work out a long-term agreement between the university system, and it's not UW Stevens Point Wausau, it's the university system. On how do we resolve it? Washington County tried to do it through the budget and unsuccessfully, but I think that all of the two-year campuses across the state have a similar concern. And if you start looking at what happened at Richland Center with the university basically closing that study, it's important that we have that long-term agreement. If we're going to be asked to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into that facility, we ought to know we stand long-term. I think that in this case, it's needed, but I'm hoping that we can leverage the second investment in that chiller system into the discussions for what is our long-term plan with that campus. Where is the university? What commitments will they make to the community? That's my hope. But I think this is sort of this phase one, and I would look to Chris because he's really put it together. This is sort of a necessary evil to protect our investment in, or not necessary evil, but a necessary investment in the building. I think we've got some options potentially with going forward, but there are always capital expenses associated with that campus. And again, some of those are not related to our buildings, but to the operations, and we've had discussions in the past. We need to resolve that going forward. I would suggest the Washington County approach on a statewide basis for all 2-year campuses. We've had discussions with Administrator Leonard and others on trying to get those going, but we need a commitment from the state going forward.
So I would ask Deputy Administrator, if we, instead of doing it in a two-phased approach, part this year and part next year, if we just delayed the whole thing until next year and give us time to try to negotiate an agreement, would that be an acceptable approach, or would that be putting us in harm from, having a breakdown, basically?
Right. I think it's a treacherous crystal ball, really, because this particular project is the central heating plant for the whole campus. So if it were to go down at some point and it was winter, then you would have no heat anywhere. So then you would have to figure out what your stopgap measures would be to provide the heat, and that gets much more complicated in a hurry. So in terms of the campus as a whole, I think that that's sort of necessary, however you want to qualify it. It's something that the equipment in there is at end of life. The way we broke out the phasing, and we spent a lot of time working with the vendor who helped us put together the budget, and then our lead HVAC technician sort of redesigned things to fold better into the county system, automation and otherwise. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, but that approach takes end-of-life pieces of equipment, and there's also an end-of-life boiler in the second phase that then gets replaced, which then precludes the need for 2 other boilers, which are similarly end-of-life, and they had to not use those this entire year because they couldn't get parts. So you've got a kind of a tangled web in that heating plant, and the first phase, I think, allows you to limp through. It shifts to a single burner, which is more efficient through natural gas. It moves you away from fuel oil as a backup, and allows you to get to that second year, which really is like the lion's share of the overhaul of that space. So I don't feel comfortable saying with certainty that you would be able to get through a year. And again, I think to me the biggest point is just that it being the central heating plant poses a much larger dilemma than if it was just like in a building or a portion of the Marathon Hall or something like that. So if I can inquire further to see if it could limp along. I think part of the challenge there could be just in the length of the term of negotiations. Like, would that be resolved in a year? I mean, it sounds like a long time, but you're also talking about one of the 2-year campuses statewide wanting to have similar conversations, I imagine, with the regents. And there's additional complications with that with the Washington County model, as Senator Markline was discussing earlier this week about how the current legislation precludes the use of educational purposes for those properties should they shift purpose. So that raised some questions from the Washington County executive, who I'm guessing will seek to have that changed somewhat because of how they were trying to grapple with their issue, which mirrors ours and others across the state. But again, I think at the end of the day, regardless of purpose, we own the buildings. And so when it comes to maintaining them for occupancy for whoever's there, but also just general conditions, if you don't have the ability to use heat to balance humidity and other things, it starts to lead to a lot of other issues.
If I can add one thing, and this kind of goes back to your other previous comments, Supervisor Baker, about lack of clarity in agreements. The lease agreement, the agreement we have with the Board of Regents as it relates to the University of Marathon County. See, I'm trying to throw you a bone there, John. But the UW Stevens Point Wausau campus requires in essence, one very specific thing from the county and one very specific thing from the Board of Regents. The Board of Regents is the university agrees to maintain during the term of the agreement a university center of the University of Wisconsin in the aforementioned building and to provide an adequate instructional and administrative staff. The immediately preceding requirement relates to the county, and it says the county agrees to provide all necessary repairs and any mutually approved improvements and alterations to the buildings and surrounding premises. So my only concern, and that's why I was getting up to ask Chris, how exactly to your point, how likely is it that these end-of-life boilers actually end their life in the coming year? And for the same reasons that Chris referenced, we're talking about a central heating plant that pretty much makes that entire campus and all of the water pipes that run through it very, very problematic and potentially unusable. So I don't know what the ramifications are, and I walked over to Corporation Counsel, and again, these are agreements from 1963 that are not overly descriptive, but what are the ramifications of the county not doing that in terms of breaching that duty and something occurring? And are we financially liable for the university relocating all of their operations to another? I don't know. That's not within the 4-page agreement from 1963. But there's the opportunity that is in front of us to sit down and talk with the university is not new, as Chair Robinson referenced. That's been from the day I started in administration, there have been questions about what the future of that campus looks like. I do think there's an opportunity to sit down and partner with the university. It's also in their interest to update these pieces of equipment because while we maintain the buildings, they pay the utilities. So I don't know if we can calculate what those projected savings might look like and get some kind of front-end contribution. I think the overall idea is certainly a positive one, I think.
Yeah, and I just add too that I think, from a facilities perspective, countywide, there are a lot of areas that, historically some of these agreements and funding that's been allocated over time is insufficient now. And so I think not only do you need to look at how much funding are we allocating to take care of maintenance of these facilities, but also do we have the personnel to do it? And then and what I'm thinking of is cost avoidance here, because if you're actually able to maintain a new building, you're going to get a lot more life out of it. So, and the only reason I bring that up is it's not just a central heating plant. There's variable frequency drives or VFDs that have gone out. There are all of the Honeywell controls over there are blowing up at the same time because they were all installed at the same time. So we've been getting other budgetary hits at the campus that we're accommodating, and because they're essentially things you have to do to keep the systems working. If there are some things that aren't necessarily something you want to look to do in the future, then that would be something you could hold out and say, well, maybe we won't operate this building anymore. Or maybe if I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say that the pool there is outdated and no programming, so if a drive fails there, then maybe we wouldn't repair that. But I think that the conversations with the UW representatives would mirror the other sorts of things you're talking about when you look at the older agreements, because if I believe it's around $58,000 a year the county gives them for maintaining the entire campus. And they have a 4-person crew, which currently is 2. Their last director of maintenance retired and they couldn't fill the position. So now they've got a situation where we're stepping in as well more directly, especially on the HVAC side. And I've got another idea to talk with Dr. Toms about that I mentioned earlier this week with one of the representatives there. And she's not here just for personal family reasons. I want to make sure that I mention that because she would be here otherwise. But I think that even when it comes to how facilities historically hadn't been tasked with, looking after highways is facilities as closely or parks facilities as closely. These are other chapters of the same book I'm talking about where, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good things out there, but that facilities maintenance and sort of cost avoidance lens needs to be applied more broadly. So that's part of what I'm trying to do with our current personnel, but also and I'll talk more about this, at future meetings, but kind of restructuring the department and perspective to better accommodate that sort of thing so that when we get to these types of conversations, we have clearer answers and even being able to stagger things in a way that you don't have like every 15 or 20 years these massive hits because all the equipment's failing at the same time. So a longer answer to some of the questions you've been raising, but I think that there are good points being made about previous agreements, what they were based upon, and whether or not some of those things are still relevant today in terms of what needs to be done to take care of things.
Okay, I guess I'll defer to that and not make a suggestion for that one as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Baker. Any other members have any concerns for the Finance Committee? Okay. Now we will move up to number 5, policy issues, discussion and potential committee determination. 5A, Marathon County government role in providing affordable, high-quality extension child care. We do in the packet here, there was a presentation from Angela, I really can't pronounce her last name, but it, to me, what she is stating that to help try to reform Youngstar to reduce the degree regulations burden on the providers. And this is kind of stated into what Supervisor Baker's resolution is. Part of it, but let me get to the resolution here. Where is it the whereas that the reports indicated that state regulations indicate that Youngstar rating systems should have to play a more substantial decrease in regulating for child care providers. But on the other hand, it is stating that, or she is stating that going from a in-home provider to have to be licensed and certified for this, but it goes from they can do an in-home for 4 to 8 children. I do kind of agree with that being to have a private provider to be certified, but is it going to be a burden to the child care industry for in-home? But I'm just going to open this up to the committee. So any other response to the resolution? Supervisor Rosenberg.
This resolution ends up being just a non-starter for me right from the beginning. The piece that was in our packet is really a hit piece on child care providers and their education. It's saying that this will help. It's a minor thing. when they talk about burdensome regulations, she's not describing what they are. It doesn't say anything, it just characterizes things and moves along. It's poorly done. Marathon County apparently has found their way to the bottom of the ratio of children to childcare professionals, and we're going to keep going there with this kind of resolution. We'll stay at the bottom. It isn't a matter of warehousing kids and seeing how many you can stuff in and how young you can get people to do that work. It's about kids growing up, interacting, learning, healthy food, healthy environment, activities, and getting them ready to be citizens. And it's a very important time of their life. This whole resolution is so flawed to me, there's nothing I can do with it. Thank you.
Okay, any other opinions from the committee or anybody else? Supervisor Robinson.
I too have concerns over the message that results from the resolution. The child care crisis is a national crisis. It is not a crisis in states with more regulations than those with less regulations. It is an issue of reimbursement of providers and adequacy of those rates. And as we struggle with jailers and the staff for our nursing home, CNAs and others, it's a market, there are market conditions that drive up cost, and if you're not competitive with your races, your pay rates, you lose employees. And this resolution doesn't recognize that at all. In fact, I would also disagree with the provision that ARPA dollars cannot be used for childcare. That would be a county policy decision, not necessarily consistent with the regulations that are there, because one could argue that a good number of people that left the workforce and women that left the workforce during the pandemic and did not return did not do so because of the cost of childcare. And therefore it's pandemic related, and you could use ARPA funds to address that issue. So I think you need to, this is I don't think it addresses the issue relative to how do we attract more people to work in the child care area, how do we create increases in opportunities. I think we've had horror stories relative to health care or child care providers in the past, and the need for regulation, unfortunately. And this resolution doesn't necessarily solve that problem.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Baker?
I think you wouldn't have to search very long to also find horror stories in childcare for licensed childcare. So I'd like not to use that as a reason. I would be the first to agree that this resolution won't solve the childcare issue. I also would be the first to say that I don't think the childcare issue is the government's responsibility. I think it's a parent's responsibility. At the last meeting that we discussed this, one of our supervisors said that we should not take into account the document because it was from an organization that believed in family responsibility, limited government, and various other virtues that I strongly believe in. So I think there's just a fundamental difference of opinion with whether the government is responsible for raising your children and providing for them, or whether the parents are responsible for raising your children and providing for them. I am fine with this resolution. I wrote it, so of course I'm fine. I'm also fine if someone wants to provide some other, if someone else wants to come up with some recommendations. I'm not going to, because I'm done with the discussion. I'm not with the discussion, I don't mean to say it that way. I'm not going to write another resolution. So, we can vote on this one and accept it, or someone else can take a lead to write something else. We can vote on that. That's up to the committee to decide. But I don't think that, I don't think, in my opinion, it's the government's responsibility to be taking care of our children at a young age. And I know that's not a universal opinion. I know there's other people that disagree with that, and it's a discussion. But that's kind of where I came from. So I will leave it up to the committee to decide if they want to vote on this or have more discussion. Thank you.
Supervisor Rosenberg.
There's an issue here. In the state legislature, my understanding, they're talking about rules and regulations. They're talking about funding money. There's a fight, of course, between the legislature and the governor, and also nationally they're talking about it. And I don't know as we ought to be, I don't want to do nothing, but we might be just a month or two ahead of ourselves here. The reason I picked on the article in there is because the conclusion is already drawn before the research is done. It's not academically sound, and that's why I wouldn't use it, and that's why I discount it.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Lemmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the WCA conference, I attended a child care presentation. Forward Analytics has a brand new paper out, and it really does talk about how broken the system is. And in maybe your day and even maybe my day, I don't know, the government didn't take care of child care subsidies, but it's a whole different market today. And if you want, I can give you this to read. It's online as well. It's very compelling. I would absolutely love to hear from Child Caring, because I'm sure she knows the data much more than I do. But this is an infrastructure issue. We've got businesses around town who cannot get employees because their workers are staying home because they cannot find high-quality child care. And I agree with Supervisor Rosenberg that this is the most important time to invest in a human being is when they're babies. It's because their brain development will take them into their adulthood and make them good citizens and make them good workers. I cannot stress to you enough the 30-some years that I've had in education how you can tell when kids are traumatized and when they're not. And good quality child care is not just being at home with a burned out person who is needing to take care of them. I mean, we need good workers, and our child care employees right now, whether they're home, whether they're in facilities, they are burned out. I was a teacher, I was burned out, and I could step away. I was privileged enough to do that, but I had a pension and a spouse at home who also worked. So some of these workers, they don't make enough money to even have their own houses. They are working poor. They're one disaster away from a catastrophe themselves. The system is broken, and we need to boost salaries, and we need to decrease tuition, and that is not going to happen by just deregulating.
Thank you. Supervisor Baker?
I do want to make an additional point that I've neglected to make and was pointed out to me at the last time we discussed this. The one whereas the state provides financial child care assistance to lower income families through Wisconsin Shares, with a statewide total of more than $300 million provided over the last 12 months to more than 17,500 Wisconsin families to assist in providing child care to more than 31,000 children. And that, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that assistance averages $10,000 a year per child. So there is substantial financial support for lower income families. And I'm not saying that's, handles all the problems, but I just wanted to mention that there is Wisconsin State Child Care Assistance for Families. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opinions?
Just a quick question. Is the committee, if they haven't seen the Forward Analytics and they want to see it, would you want me to email it to everybody? I'm just asking because it's available. And it seems like it's getting at some of the questions people have.
That was in our mailbox.
Okay, I just wanted to ask.
Yep. Yeah, everybody should have got their copy of that. Very good article. You know, it does state, you know, how the system is broken down, but hoping that down and our legislators can get something figured out here in the next couple months, but I'm not sure. But on the other hand, we talked about, you know, the parents' responsibility to raise your own, you know, children for and getting into child care. But again, the government part of it is still in there far as trying to subsidize some of these child care facilities, if I'm not mistaken. But it's like Supervisor Rosenberg said, this is down the road a ways. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But is it, John, is it feasible for the county to use ARPA dollars for this? I mean, what's your opinion? And I would like the opinion of other members of the committee.
Well, ultimately, that's a decision the county board would have to make, but there are opportunities under the lost revenue side of the ARPA dollars to where there's a great deal more discretion, but there are also opportunities within the pandemic relief portion to use it. So it's a policy decision of the board. Other counties have done so. The Finance Committee has stayed clear of this issue, deferring to this committee for recommendations. When we have talked about the issue of child care, but we have talked about it in the context of being an employer, not as being a part of the community. And what is our responsibility to our employees? And we know that in trying to hire people and keep and retain staff, that child care is a critical issue that has affected our turnover rates and our ability to hire. But it's a policy decision that's before the county board.
Okay, thank you.
May I speak?
Supervisor,
This is Supervisor Butcher.
go ahead.
All right, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So after again listening, I still feel it's just not a role for government to get involved in the child care funding. Just because other counties are doing it doesn't mean that they're being successful with it. A study just came out, I heard, from Australia. When they were doing this, the government was funding. It made no difference, and it actually increased the cost of child care because it did not affect the bottom line for parents. And again, I don't hear any plan going forward as far as once the ARPA money runs out, what's the plan? It's just throwing money at it. So that's how I feel.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Bushman.
Supervisor Seifel?
Yeah. Go ahead.
This is Supervisor Marshall. As far as using ARPA money, the HR Finance has tried to stay away from doing ARPA money for things that are going to be an ongoing need, and trying to stick to things that are one time, as to not create a future cliff that is something that needs to be funded in the regular budget once ARPA is done.
Okay, thank you. Well,
So I would not be in favor of using ARPA. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I just raised the question to use, if it is appropriate to use ARPA dollars, and I had the same opinion where if we did use ARPA dollars, it's a one-time deal, and where do we go from there? So, any other questions? Supervisor Rosenberg.
I'm wondering if child caring has, I don't have a real clear picture of if I'm a family at a certain income level or a certain number of kids at certain ages. What's available to me? The shares might be, I get a child care tax credit on my income tax. I could have what do I want to say, earned income credit. Do you have a listing or something that sort of shows me what's there, what's available, how my life will change if I have a kid? Sort of a. Go ahead.
Thank you. Off the top of my head, I don't have a listing. It's something that we could potentially gather for Marathon County if you feel like that would be valuable information. I was just at a meeting this morning that was talking about Wisconsin Shares with some of the area child care programs, and they're seeing such significant drops in families utilizing that program, partly because when wages are being increased across different sectors and people are receiving raises, then it's dropping them off and their eligibility is no longer available for shares. And so now centers are seeing actually drops in some of the Wisconsin Shares families. So in our area, there's the Wisconsin Shares Child Care Subsidy. In Marathon County, we have some additional subsidies that help low-income families called Good Start Grants, which help those families who are not eligible for shares but are still under 300% of federal poverty level. So I think there are some systems in place to help support families. However, the issue is greater than that, in that the centers are still struggling even receiving those subsidies because they still aren't receiving enough income to help, keep them afloat and be successful businesses.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion on this? So we do have the resolution here. We do need a motion to go forward with the resolution to the committee for a vote. We do not have a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make the motion to
Motion
forward.
by Supervisor Unger and second by Supervisor Baker, Book. Sorry. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. All those that are not in favor of the resolution, say no.
No.
No. Supervisor Bushman? Do we have a vote from you?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the motion does pass for to forward the resolution going forward to, I would imagine this is going to go through county board. So, okay, thank you. Now, moving on here, time is getting close, but I'm going to go with 5C to consider the request for the WIRNG VDG LLC for adoption for initial resolution regarding solid waste disposal, bond funding, and renewable natural gas products plant project. No, to me, my opinion is on doing, if the county wants to do any bonding on it. If we went forward and bonded this, what's not to say, okay, another entity down the road is going to come to us and want to be bonded to do the same thing. So my opinion is I would not be in favor of doing the bonding for this company, but I am going to open it up for discussion, and we do have Christine. Okay. Here, if you have any questions, or maybe I can ask her to do a little more explaining about it, so the members know. And the guy behind me, Corp Counsel. Okay, thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can give the committee a little more background as far as how this got here. This was a proposal that was forwarded to the administrator by counsel for this LLC. The proposal is utilizing a Wisconsin statute that neither he nor I were familiar with prior to this. The request is to use the county's ability under that statute to bond, to go out for an initial resolution and bonding in the amount of up to $45 million to support this renewable natural gas production plant project, which is produced through a digester, which Kirsty can talk much more about than I can. In reviewing the statute and in discussing this with our bond counsel, the statute does allow the county to go out for bonds in this situation. The bonding authority of the county basically allows the LLC to get the county's better rates on its ability to borrow. The county does not maintain liability in the event that the bonds were defaulted on, and the county, the bonding itself doesn't count against the county's borrowing authority or ability to bond itself in the future. So those are the legalities. The policy questions, I think Chair Seefeld touched on them very well, which is, which projects, if this was a trend that started, which projects does the county decide to elect to bond for, and which does the county not elect to decide to bond for? So I think those are really were framed very well by the chair as far as what the questions are. But that's the legal background that I am aware of. Again, this was a project initiated by this private company and brought to our attention by their counsel. Initially, their request was to bring this matter to the county board in September. That obviously was not a time frame that could be accomplished. Their next request was perhaps to have this through to the county board in October. Again, with the limited information, I don't think the county is at all required to follow any timeline other than the one the county elects to follow, but just so you have that background as well.
Okay. Thank you. And I went through the presentation at ERC, and we can do, digesters out on that part of the county is a water issue out there. And the digester, and I did not know this, takes a lot of water to actually get your, how would I put this, to compost or get the gases out to go through. I don't know, do you have any other facts about the digesters?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting all of you. I'm Kirsty Heidenreich. I'm the county conservationist, so I'm in the Marathon County's Conservation Planning and Zoning Department. At the ERC committee, we really have dug into this, and the HR Finance Committee did kind of kick it back to the Environmental Resources Committee to dig into some of the complex environmental considerations that we are dealing with this particular site. So I was just assuming that with this committee, we would want to keep everything at a very kind of high level discussion. I do have 4 PowerPoint slides with me if you guys wanted me to pop them in and look at a picture of a digester or a graph, things like that. I'm happy to do it, or I'm happy to just, answer some questions. And I certainly do want to clarify that, our department is absolutely not pro-digester or anti-digester. We're give you the information esters. So, that's what we're doing. And there certainly are many benefits to digesters. There can be some downfalls to them as well. But, what we do know about this particular site is that there are some complexities given the geology of the area, and then the groundwater quantity and groundwater quality in that specific site as well. So that's why ERC is kind of digging into this a little bit further. That being said, though, Chair Seafolt is right. This is not just a decision based on this site, but a lot of what you're talking about will certainly set the precedents for these requests going forward. And Chair Gibbs had mentioned in the HR Finance Committee meeting that he has gotten, or he has been in several other discussions with large farms we have in Marathon County around this size about them also wanting to potentially get a digester as well. So it's not the sort of thing where we're saying, well, maybe in the future we'll get similar requests. It's sounding like those probably will be coming down the pipeline as well. So I appreciated him sharing that information in that meeting. So I can just give you a very few quick facts here. Did you guys want me to put those slides on the screen? Or?
Does the committee want them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll just switch to up there then. I know I'm a visual learner myself, so. Really? Okay. You guys can see this. This is good. Okay. So these are just the couple of slides we used for ERC. So this is just a picture of a similar facility that is in Wisconsin. The University of Wisconsin has a very helpful and recent guide to digesters in Wisconsin, and that's where we kind of dug into some of this information as well. So in that guide, they did just quantify kind of what we're working with in the state of Wisconsin. So we do have 43 dairy digesters that are currently operational. Of those, 22 are producing electricity, and the others are producing renewable natural gas. There are 11 that are currently under construction as well. So where you'll typically find these are typically at farms that have an average of about 4,000 animal units. We say animal units based on 1,000 pounds of animal. So for example, a dairy cow is 1.5 animal units. So, farms where there are thousands of animals there. And just to give you a very brief overview of how this works, when we're looking at these digesters, it is producing biogas, and then the other thing it's producing is the products that come out of it. So the biogas is what is used to either give us heat or electricity. gas, and then there's always a flare or flame excess as well. So what still comes out of those digesters, you're going to always have a solid that comes out of it as well. So you can picture that kind of like what you would picture compost or bedding used for animals. And there is still a liquid that is concentrated that comes out as well. So it is typically used as a fertilizer that is land applied. That liquid is much more concentrated as a fertilizer than what you would be just taking out of a manure pit. So things taken out of a manure pit, a lot of that really does end up being water or milk house waste, but these are very concentrated nutrients because those digesters do end up removing a lot of that excess liquid. So one benefit of removing a lot of that excess liquid, as a conservationist, I try to keep nutrients out of our surface waters and our groundwaters here in Marathon County. So one of the products that comes out there is a product that is not as liquidy. So if you're land applying it to a field, it's going to have less of a chance to probably run off the field or in a rain event, leave the field as well. So this is what kind of an inside view of a digester would look like. You can see the gas in and out. And these are just a few of the, common fallacies or quick facts we shared with ERC. So digesters do not reduce the amount of nitrogen or phosphorus in manure. So when digesters started becoming more popular, they were kind of touted as like a godsend to farmers who, it's like the worst thing for a lot of them to try to get enough acreage to deal with all of those, nutrients that they have in manure. It's not something where you put manure in and it like magically digests it and eats it up. So if that manure in the digester has 100 pounds of phosphorus in it, and you put that in there, you're going to get 100 pounds of phosphorus out of the digester as well. So it does not remove any source of nutrients. It just compacts it, removes the liquids that go along with it. It does change the form of nitrogen or phosphorus in manure. So it makes that nitrogen more available to plants, but it also makes it more susceptible to losses like ammonium. So what that means is the nutrients that you are getting, they are more volatile when they can be put on the field. It just means that you need to be extra careful on when they are applied because they could have negative effects on surface or groundwater as well. So there are special products that can be used when land applying those to make sure that that volatilization does not occur. One benefit is that it does reduce pathogens in manure. So this really has been wonderful for our colleagues over on the east side of Wisconsin, where their bedrock does have many fractures in it. So when they have manure that finds its way down through their very shallow soil and into the cracks of bedrocks, their wells were getting contaminated by the bacteria found in manure. So when this is land applied, that product does not have bacteria or pathogens in it anymore. Those are removed through the digester. Digesters do reduce manure odors in them. So I am sure folks who, live in a country area that smell this manure being land applied, you can always tell when it's spring or fall in Wisconsin. It's a smell of fresh country air. So this, when it's land applied, that smell is greatly reduced. That does not mean that the smell of the digester itself is drastically reduced. So some of them, the smell is a little bit more of like a composty or a soil smell. But depending on what is going into the digester, sometimes that smell is also horrible at the site of the digester as well. And that's not just coming from me, that's just a fact of, what it all depends on the ingredients put into it. So this is just the last slide that I have for you. What this is it's depicting the natural gas transmission lines in Wisconsin. So those are in orange for you. And then what the colors in the counties are representing are the number of CAFOs in each county. And what a CAFO is, it's a confined animal feeding operation. So these are farms that are over 1,000 animal units. And the colors that are a little bit closer to that light brown or yellow, those are the counties that have many of those large farms. So it's kind of interesting to see where those renewable gas transmission lines connect with those large farms. And some of those farms are the ones that do have a digester on the grid. The reason I wanted to show you this picture is because in just preparing to be able to speak a little bit with our committees here at the county, I did reach out to colleagues in Lafayette County. And I connected with that county in particular because when I was trying to Google the consultant name on the letters that you all received in your packets, it came up that his name was on a project in Lafayette County. So we don't really know much about this company, so I had to Google the consultant's name. So called the Lafayette County Conservation Department, talked to them about some of the hurdles or potential benefits with the project, and they recommended talking directly with the county board chair, since he kind of connected on a higher level when this was proposed in that county. So the county board chair was very nice, and he did say he is more than happy to talk with any, supervisor from Marathon County who wants to get into the details with him. When they did have a project proposed there, it was multiple farms that were hoping to bring their manure to one digester. And they were also asking the county to bond funds as well. And the Lafayette County Board did not feel comfortable agreeing to bond that. And so that did not pass at the county board level. That same company then connected with a single farm and got a digester lined up for that farm in an unzoned township where there wasn't regulation by the county board that could help make a decision whether or not that was a good fit for that location. So that's just directly what I heard from that county board chair. He just also gave me a few little notes, knowing that I was going to talk with our county board. He said, here's just some helpful tips for what the county board could ask themselves. He said it'd be good to ask if we have a natural gas transmission line nearby. If not, that natural gas does need to be trucked out from that facility. And a few states on the West Coast, like Oregon, California, Washington, they have unbelievable incentives for this gas right now. So Lafayette County's natural gas is being trucked to California from that site in Lafayette County, which kind of just blows my mind that they're doing that, but those must be incredible incentives. So that's one good question. And then he also said it might be helpful to ask, how will the biogas be used? So is it going to be used to produce electricity? Will that benefit our local landowners to have that renewable energy be sent into our electric grid, or will it replace natural gas in a pipeline here for Wisconsin homes? And then the one other person that I quickly connected with was the DNR chief for the Bureau of Groundwater, Adam Freehofer, who's been very helpful to us when we've been working on groundwater issues here in Marathon County. And the reason I connected with him is I had already previously connected with him about some groundwater issues in this area. And he did feel comfortable with me sharing with you some of his comments. He did say that he does have significant concerns about a digester going in on this particular site, just due to its groundwater quantity problems and the already existing groundwater quality problems of private wells already in this area. So like I said previously, it's just very sensitive geology. There is already known problems. And Adam also said, just in touring other digesters here in Wisconsin, there really is an unbelievable amount of electricity and water that's needed for these. And there is not a way that the DNR can sign off on those high capacity wells in this area, which would likely be needed. We do not know that because we have not received any type of plan from this entity, but those might be good questions to ask as well.
Thank you. Supervisor Rosenberg.
Why do they need so much water?
It all depends on what they're putting into the digester. It depends on, how much water is coming from the dairy. But in order to compost things, I'm sure it takes a certain amount of moisture and then to get things out of the pipeline. I don't know. If we did have some sort of design, we could certainly comment a little bit more on that.
I've worked with digesters. I don't understand where the water comes from.
Yeah.
A little, but not mass quantities. The other thing is, what's the total cost of this project?
I don't know. I don't think the county knows that.
Is it available for grants or some kind of assistance? I assume it probably is.
I'm not sure on that either. We know our conservation department knows as much as you guys know. So we actually we were not aware of this project until Supervisor Lemmer reached out and just wanted to glean a little bit more of environmental knowledge related to this. I can say that we do have a digester going in on the western side of Marathon County right now on a CAFO out there that was privately funded, and we permitted it through our department, reviewed all the specifications of it, but they just went the private route.
We'd be writing these bonds to a New Jersey-based company, which I assume has almost no assets, and they're going to be tax-free bonds? Is that?
Supervisor, John, go ahead.
So this issue came to the executive committee and was was sent to both the EEDC committee and the HR finance committee. And when the finance committee was looking at it, we decided that there were environmental factors that should go to the ERC meeting, committee, which is why we're doing it. But the proposal is for a LLC to basically work with the Vandergeest farm to operate. The LLC would basically have all responsibility for that facility. They're trying to access government or bonds at below rate interest rates. So they're hoping to take advantage of the tax exempt portion of the interest rates. It is along the lines, not exactly, so be careful, of what we did with Bug Tussle, where we joined with 4 other counties and did conduit bonding for broadband in the county. And in that case, we were responsible if they defaulted. And as a result, we went through extensive negotiations and generated a number of legal documents and received 40 basis points on any outstanding debt associated with Wisconsin. It was a $75 million issue. $25 million was dedicated to Marathon County, and there are drawdowns and all sorts of provisions. This one doesn't have that corresponding responsibility or liability for the county. There are, however, issuance costs that we would want, if we were to decide to proceed, we would want to have covered. And the question is would we want to share in their savings if they can borrow at 7% in the commercial, 7-8%, and can borrow through us at 4%? And I'm just pulling those numbers out of the air, not because should we receive some of that 3% savings, but we're not at that point. We would need to identify the terms that we would want to engage them in the discussions on, but we're not there. But so basically, they're trying to access the capital market under a state statute that allows them to either go through the state or through the county. They are choosing to approach the county to use our bonding authority, probably because it would be quicker, I would hazard a guess, and therefore cheaper for them. And we have to make the policy decision of whether or not we want to facilitate that. So I would hazard to state that I think the Finance Committee is looking at the financing, how it impacts the county. I think the task of this committee is how does it impact the economic growth and sustainability in the county. And ERC is sort of looking at the environmental issues, and we'll come up with some sort of composite recommendation at the end of the day, but no decision has been made. But Vandergeest is not owning it. They are contracting with in essence, a developer, or a LLC, that wants to access the below market interest rate to make the project financially viable.
Under what conditions could we turn down the next one? This has already got, environmental issues on it. What would we do when the next one comes to us and says,
Well, those are all the policy discussions that we need to, as a board, have. The question is it at the end of the day a good policy decision? I think the Finance Committee, again, was looking at the risks. So we sat down with our auditor and our financial advisor, and we will have to footnote it, but we have no legal liability. Could that impact us in the future? They didn't think so. But we don't have that responsibility. The issue becomes one, is as a policy, is this something that you would want to do? The pluses are it addresses an issue associated with an important part of our economy, the agricultural community and the animal waste, and generates natural gas as a result of it. On the downside is, what are the environmental impacts to the county, and do they, on balance, is it good or bad for the county? And that's really the question. If it's good or bad for the county, the state statutes allow it, then the question is, do we want to get into preferring one? Well, you're not preferring one, you would then have to consider each one on their own merits. So you could have a number of these come in, and I would imagine if you did it for one, somebody else would say, well, that makes sense, why don't we do it? And then you would have to set up your review criteria that you would apply to the evaluation of those. Subject to the state, I think there are some statewide, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's some statewide caps as to how much private activity you can have under that bonding authority. But I could be wrong. But we would want to verify that. But there are probably some statewide limits on how much can happen.
Okay. Good.
well, let me just say that I generally like digesters, and I don't know anywhere near enough about this project to say good, bad, indifferent. I'm very disturbed about the fact that it's a New Jersey company. They're not paying taxes in Wisconsin, and they probably have no money, so I don't, who are you dealing with? Just a bunch of legal entities pushing paper around and playing the game. I don't like it. I'm uncomfortable.
Okay, Supervisor Baker.
Thank you. So I share the sentiment. I don't know nearly enough about this project to know whether I support it or don't support it. I know there's concerns with the water. There's other environmental concerns. I do, we are the EED committee, as Supervisor Robinson said. I mean, I know I used to be a dairy farmer. I know you used to be a dairy farmer. I know there's a lot less dairy farmers than there used to be. How many CAFO units do we have in Marathon County that would be of this size?
We have 15 CAFOs in Marathon County. Our average animal units per CAFO is 3,500, but we have CAFOs that are much larger and much smaller.
So of ones that might be potential 15, you're saying, or?
I don't think our largest CAFO is quite up that high. There's a CAFO of that size just over the county line.
No, but I'm saying as a number, how many potential?
I'm sorry.
How many potential? So we're saying there might be a lot of people come and ask, how many is a lot? How many would that be? What's the?
Yeah, it's in reading the document from the University of Wisconsin that they put out about these. It sounds like you need about 4,000 animal units to operate a digester. So some of those digesters are multiple farms. So CAFOs could combine and all use the same digester, but you need about 4,000.
How many
units.
4,000 CAFO units do we have in Marathon County?
Well, if we have 15 CAFOs, the average is 3,500 animal units. I mean, There could probably be close to 10 digesters, and we would have enough manure if we don't look at all of our little farms, assume they wouldn't want to contribute.
So we may have 10, just best guess right now, we may have 10 people that come in and ask us to this. I guess my question would be, is that 10 farms that are going to be gone if we don't, how, I know farming is a tough industry, I mean, are they, what is the benefit to the farm, and is this going to make a difference for their sustainability? I'm not saying I'm for this, I'm just saying as a economic development, I mean, I think that's a question we need to ask. Why would we do this? My first response is, why should the county, why are we having a meeting about this? I mean, why are we taking resources, staff resources, county board resources? But if we can make a difference in those 10 or 15 farms, when I think that number was 100 times larger when I was farming, maybe. I don't know what their actual number is, but 10 times larger for sure. Chair Seafield probably knows. If we can keep that industry in Marathon County by doing this, then maybe it's something we need to consider, not just dismiss out of hand. I mean, we still have to look at the environmental issues. We have to make sure that we're comfortable with everything, but I think we owe it to the agriculture industry to at least consider it. So I guess that'd be my opinion. Thank you.
And one thing that I'll add to it is my understanding that this is for any type of renewable energy, not just digesters. So it could also be solar power, wind power, that's asking for the same type of bonding through Marathon County. But our most likely people talking to us, it sounds like in the near future, would be digester folks.
There is one farm on the western part of the county that is, do they have that digester going yet?
No, but it has started construction.
Okay, now that farm, is that done by the farm or is it done by investors?
There is an out-of-state corporation that has bought the majority shares of that farm. So the majority shares of that farm is now owned by an out-of-state corporation, and that out-of-state corporation signed an agreement with another out-of-state corporation to build a digester.
Okay, so they basically, it's being run by investors.
Correct.
Correct, okay, thank you. So that's what it's coming down to, this is a $45 million request for a bond for this. And my opinion is I don't like this to go through, but I don't know, the opinion of the committee here is that we are supposed to be looking at the overall health of the county, not, the three committees, like John said, are looking at it. And this got referred to us through exec. Yeah, I'm looking for exec. And I kind of wondered why it got referred to us, but now I can see why. But Supervisor Lemmer, you had a question.
I did. When I read through the packet, when it came to HRFP, it said there will be 10 jobs. Do we have any idea of the spread of the wages? And is there a way to get all of our questions answered? Is there going to be a presentation by either Vandergeest or this LLC?
Yeah, I don't know, and you probably don't know the answer either.
I am not biased either way. I can see pros and cons, absolutely. I will just say we do work on projects, of this size quite frequently, and usually there are consultants that are like with you every step of the way, giving you all the information you need. So it is strange for us that we have not been involved in it or heard anything, but I think that would be a wonderful suggestion from the county board is to ask for that information from a consultant so that you can make a more educated decision. Absolutely.
Supervisor Rosenberg?
I'm assuming that the 10 new employees are with the LLC, and I'm assuming that the that Vandergeest, in turn, gets rid of a bunch of employees because they got to be spreading and doing other things with that manure now. I mean, I would think that, is it a net gain of 10 new employees? I'm thinking not.
Yeah, and I would not know the answer to that either, but anyways, thank you for your presentation, and I take it from the discussion from the committee is that we're not in favor of doing the bonding for this LLC. Am I correct?
Yes.
We need, yeah, okay, we're going to need more information. As the time goes by and we're needing more information, the LLC is pushing for us to put this on our county agenda. By the time we get all the facts, it could be December, January, and they might not even want to, go with us. So, okay. Thanks again. Now you know about digesters.
I just had a thought. I don't think any of the committees yet have directed staff to reach out to this LLC to see if they would be willing to come and make a presentation. I don't know if that's something the committee wants us to do, but certainly this isn't a staff-driven thing. So Kirsty's done her share of research. I've done my share, but they would have a lot of the answers that you're looking for. If that's something that the committee's interested in, I can at least have the outreach and see if that's something they would be interested in.
I would say I would support that, but we also should give them a reasonable expectation of our turnaround. I mean, if they're expecting an answer in October, or if we need to tell them that's not happening. So if you're interested in proceeding, it's going to be 4 months, not a month.
So if we make a request to have this, they come forward and give us more information, I think it should be at a bigger level so everybody, not just this committee, but everybody on the county board can digest this, I guess. So, okay.
Supervisor Seefeld?
Yes, go ahead.
I think it would also be beneficial if we could have a local farmer, someone from Marathon County that's impacted by it, to get their feedback, how it improves for them. Because it's not much to help someone from New Jersey, but it's more important to see how it impacts our residents within the county.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, that's a thought too. If some farmers want to volunteer that are going like Vandergeest or would want to come forward and give them, come with them for their presentations. So we're recommending that. So okay, I'm going to move down. It's getting late here. I'm going to move down to the educational presentation. Kim is not here from McDepco. Leah, the library report, I know you did the budget thing, but if you want to give us a short presentation, go ahead.
Certainly. I hear short and understand it. You've heard my voice enough today. Anyhow, you've got my report in your packet. Things are going lovely at the library. I just want to highlight a couple of items that are of import that have been happening lately. First up on the report is the strategic plan update. WILS, Wisconsin Library Services, is our consultants for the strategic plan, and they're guiding us through the process. So we have a steering committee, and they've had their kickoff meeting, and they met, and they're creating a timeline and a plan so that we can have some community conversations, we can have some one-on-one interviews with stakeholders, and we can have some staff input as well. So that is where we're at in the process. We had our kickoff meeting, and we're moving right along. It's an exciting thing. I think I told you last month that it's something that we've never done in the past. We've never had a strategic plan in the past. So it's nice to know that we are gaining vision and focus, and we will know where we are headed in the next 3 to 5 years or so. The next thing to mention is just kudos to my staff for another successful Central Wisconsin Book Festival that just concluded. They had 40-odd programs across 3 different cities, and I think there were upwards of 600 attendees at those programs. So mostly it's authors, it's mostly adult programming. It's our biggest adult event of the year, as in complement to our SLP, Summer Library Program for kids. But there were a couple of children's authors, and it was just a really nice, successful event where we were able to collaborate with other cities. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Leah? Okay, thank you. And we will go to the UW Extension Monthly Report.
All right, thank you, Chair Seifelt. We'll also be quick. You have the report in the packet. Just highlight a couple of things. One, we have a new educator on board, Julia Perak, who is our FoodWise educator. So we're fully staffed in the Marathon County office at this point, which we're very excited about. Julia is just getting started, but her focus within FoodWise is going to be primarily in school classrooms doing nutrition education. So we haven't had a real strong presence in schools in Marathon County for several years. So we're looking forward to getting that reestablished. 4-H, this is actually National 4-H Week, so you may have seen some 4-H promotion around, including some media and TV appearances from staff. But one highlight there moving forward is that they're also doing more work within schools. So they're establishing and supporting 4-H after-school programming. So one of their main goals for this year is to grow into the largest 4-H program in the state, and that would be one way for that to potentially happen. And then one last item in the report, just to highlight the section that says additional extension outreach programming. All of those things that are included in there are from educators who are not specifically Marathon County educators or specialists. So those are other resources that we're bringing into the county to support programming happening there. So obviously one of those benefits of extension is that statewide network of educators and resources that we're bringing into Marathon County. So happy to take any questions, but otherwise I will leave it there.
Any questions for Jeremy? Okay, thank you. Moving back up to 5B, Marathon County's role in providing affordable housing. I am going to push this off to the next committee meeting. I do have some information from the WCA that I will bring forwarding, because I went to one of the standout committees forums, and it's interesting to what they recommend that what counties should do. And I am asked Supervisor Lemmer to make a resolution for affordable housing, and we are working on that, and we should have that resolution for the next EED meeting. So that'll be on the agenda for next month. Okay, next meeting time, dates, announcement, future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Any announcements? Okay. Next meeting date, November 2nd, 2023, 3 p.m. Number 9, motion to adjourn by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Unger. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and hoping next month's meeting won't be this long. But I'm not making any promises.